Good afternoon and welcome to the UK Column News. It is the 8th of July 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Gerrish and Mike Robinson are here in Plymouth. And we have a few guests in today, so hello to you. Weather?
Well, the weather here in Plymouth is sunny with some very light showers of rain, and it appears that across the country it's much the same. I haven't got a lot of chat about the weather in the chat box, which is unusual.
Yeah, there are better things to be talking about at the moment.
Serious things.
Yeah.
Well, we thought we'd start with a little bit of overseas news today, and thank you very much for the traveller who sent us in this wonderful picture. This is Estonia, a national festival. It's been underway in the last few days, and the traveller thought we would be particularly interested to see that G4S is here operating throughout Europe. So if you're wondering what's happening with these very big security companies, Serco, G4S, they're not doing the business just in UK. The aim, of course, is to have these huge corporate global companies running security throughout Europe and possibly further afield. But all is not well in the camp overseas, Mike. You've found a bit of information here about spying, I think.
Yeah, because Germany's getting a bit upset. This is built, and they're talking about an NSA. Well, they've been talking about the NSA spying on Germany for quite some time. But in fact, what has happened now is that the CIA have been caught recruiting a German intelligence officer. Well, they recruited him and he was passing them documents for 2 years. Germany is naturally a little bit upset about this. Because I think, as you pointed out earlier, they do it on each other, but it's always nice not to get caught. I mean, it does seem to be a fairly incompetent thing to do, Brian, to get caught under these circumstances.
Well, I think we could say we've seen quite a lot of incompetence from the CIA over the years, not to mention the Bay of Pigs, of course.
Yeah, so this was a 31-year-old agent. He'd been paid 2 years ago. He got a startup payment of €10,000 in cash and a laptop.
Was that a business startup grant?
It was, yes,
Yeah,
apparently.
okay.
And for emergencies, he had a phone number in New York to ring. And of course, that was identified as a CIA telephone number. So they weren't terribly clever about it. The Germans are now demanding that the joint intelligence staff in the embassy in Berlin is replaced. And in fact, I think they're even potentially calling for the ambassador himself to be replaced. So they're not too happy about it.
Yeah, of course, what they really need is the President of the United States to be replaced, and then we might actually start to get somewhere, but don't know whether Merkel has realised that yet. We should remember, of course, that it was the Germans that produced the original heart of the American spying agency anyway, at the end of the Second World War.
Indeed.
We'll leave the historians to look into that a bit deeper.
But you're right to focus on Obama, because we've been pointing out recently that he's under a bit of pressure at home, and even more pressure because this is Peggy Noonan. Now, it has to be said, Peggy Noonan was a scriptwriter for the Republican Party, so you would expect her comments about Obama to be pretty negative, but this was unbelievably harsh. So she says, I don't know if we sufficiently understand how weird and strange, how historically unparalleled this presidency has become. We've got a sitting president who was just judged in a major poll to be the worst since World War II. And she goes on to say that Obama once seemed a serious man. He wrote books, lectured on the Constitution. Now he seems unserious, frivolous, shallow. He hangs with celebrities, plays golf. His references to Congress are merely sarcastic, like "so sue me." He's become disinterested, disengaged, almost to the point of disembodied. Presidents aren't supposed to have those illusions, she goes on to say, and they're not supposed to check out psychologically when their illusions are shattered. And really she's saying here, he isn't doing his job and he's waiting for history to recognize his greatness. Now, this is a comment that I think probably Tony Blair was one of and George W. Bush were the first national leaders to start saying, well, history will be my judge. And this, it's pure narcissism, really, and the expectation that at some point in the future their actions are going to be lauded as being almost, messianic, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the word. Believing their own reality is a key part of this. So narcissistic, certainly. Low empathy, certainly. Believing their own reality Obama in the bunker.
Yeah.
Didn't we have stories recently that how cool it is to be a narcissist, though? So they're just in with the in crowd, clearly.
That's what the mainstream press have been putting across. Yeah. It's okay to be a little bit of a
psychopath.
Yeah, so it's perhaps unsurprisingly then that Hillary Clinton is attempting to move away from Obama without seeming to be moving away from him, of course, because she can't be seen to be not supporting the president. So this is with one all-seeing eye firmly locked on the 2016 presidential election. Well, I mean, there's not really much to be said about this other than she's clearly uncomfortable with the present situation and wants to sort of be seen to be disentangled from the current administration in the hopes that perhaps it won't completely destroy her own chances.
Pete Santilli was actually due to be on today, and I'd have loved to have heard his comments with regards to that story and knowing how he feels about Mrs. Clinton there. Hopefully we'll get some comment from him in the next day or so.
Scary prospect, Hillary Clinton as president. Well, back home, we've got quite a few things going on. We don't think the British government is telling the truth. We think the agenda is a very clear cover-up of the paedophile activity within Westminster and the establishment. And I think the evidence to support what we believe is coming to the surface pretty quickly.
And what we've been reporting for long enough as well. OK, so the Express have printed this article about Stephen Adrian Smith, who became leader for the Paedophile Information Exchange back in 1979. Mr. Smith was an electrical contractor who was working at the Home Office with full security clearance. The Express claims that a book, which was written back in 1986, I can't find the name of it, by the way, but apparently it's been hidden away, but now seems to have resurfaced. And it claims that Mr. Smith has said that he had furnished an office within the Home Office and that much of Pye's less sensitive documents were stored in filing cabinets at the Home Office. According to the Express, he boasts that his security clearance was renewed each year by police without his connection to Pye ever being discovered. He was later exposed by a colleague and soon left the Home Office, and apparently he was arrested in 2011 for possession of indecent images of children. I'm sure there must be other charges around now that he could be charged with further.
But it's nobody knew. This is a theme which I think we'd like to continue. Yeah. Doesn't matter what happens, nobody actually knew. Home Office giving money to paedophiles.
Yep, 4,000.
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew. £476,250 was actually given out over 10 years to groups linked with Pye. Clear evidence found in Whitehall inquiry showing almost £500,000 was given to groups linked to Pye, and this new evidence was only made public yesterday. In the findings, it showed that the Voluntary Services Unit handed out hundreds of thousands of pounds to two groups associated with sex-supporting lobbyists. The Albany Trust, which I think we have a slide of in a moment.
You've got this little... this was the detail of the thing here, and of course NSPCC Chief Peter Wanless is going to head up an investigation. We're going to come on to that. But shortly. Here's the Albany Trust.
Here is the Albany Trust. They support sexual minorities, and they received £65,750 between 1974 and 1980. This organisation invited representatives from Pye and PAN to a few meetings in 1975 to talk about setting up a paedophile support group and having an information pamphlet made on paedophilia. Also received money was Release Charity, which gave permission for Pye to use their address for correspondence. And this morning I called Release to see if they had anything to say with regards to allowing Pye to use their address. I spoke to their chief executive, Neve Eastwood, who seemed very nice and sent me this following statement. So
this is from 2013.
Yeah, and apparently it says, it has been brought to our attention that the Pye used Release at our previous address in Elgin Avenue as care of address for a brief period in 1970s. Neither the co-founder of Release, Caroline Kuhn, or its current staff were involved with the organisation at the time and are all shocked and deeply upset that there was or could have been any connection between our work and the repugnant activities and despicable views promoted by Pye, and it goes on. But that statement apparently is fully available if anyone wants to have a look at it up on the Release website.
It goes on at the end, it says, for a full account of my run-in with the NCCL and Patricia Hewitt in 1982 and how she tried to sue me for condemning her position on incest in 1996. Please read the post on my website at. So there's more information there from Caroline Coon. If you freeze the screen, obviously you'll be able to have a look at that, but it's www.carolinecoon.com/news.htm.
And that links up on the release website anyway, so you can people can go and find it there. If they
So people distancing, once they know about this stuff, people distancing themselves pretty quickly, but nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
But this man knew.
This man did know. His name is Peter McKelvey, and he was child protection manager, and which he's the one who started off the 2012 inquiry, and who has openly said a powerful elite of paedophiles carried out the worst form of abuse. Today, Mark Sidmel, who is the permanent secretary, will face the Commons Home Affairs Select Committee about his department handling of the child abuse allegations. Theresa May spoke yesterday and confirmed there would be a Hillsborough-type inquiry led by an independent panel of experts. NSPCC Peter Wanless will lead a secondary review looking into how police and prosecutors handled the information. And Peter McKelvey spoke to BBC Today's show and mirrored basically what Chris Fay, who spoke to Bill Maloney, has said exactly the same thing. And I urge everyone to check out Bill Maloney's latest video, and we'll have links to that shortly.
Right, so this man is a good guy. He was working in children's services.
He was around Worcester area, though not so much London, where Chris Fay was working.
But he tried to get the truth out and simply squashed as usual.
But now he's coming out, and surprisingly, the BBC are talking about it.
Well, of course, the BBC need anything they can clutch onto at the moment to try and wash their reputation in view of Savile. Yeah. But who is running the inquiry? Is it NSPCC or is it...
Well, it looks like the... I mean, Mike and I had a bit of debate because Mike found a story where NSPCC, Mr Wanless was heading it up. I found a Mail article where it said they're having a secondary... Wanless is heading up a secondary inquiry, and the main inquiry is to be... announced later on who's heading up, so we're not quite sure. But this story is just basically to confirm that she has agreed to a Hillsborough-style investigation, and it's going to look into churches, hospitals, schools, political parties, and the BBC. And I think the next slide will confirm that as well.
Well, this is quite interesting because failure to report abuse is a criminal offence, but as we'll show a bit later, we've got judges in court saying, well, we've got social services simply breaking the law when children are taken away and abused, but that doesn't actually matter. So she's not saying when we catch people involved in abuse, they're going to be dealt with. She's going to say, if you don't report it. But
then we've got the mums across the country, in different parts of the country, who did try to raise and had suspicions of paedophilia activity. And they were ended up putting in mental institutions, and then social services coming in to try and take their children. And people like Bill Maloney and us have been trying to expose it for many years. Do we get a reward or something for that? If she's going to make it a crime for people not to do this, it's too little, too late. It's glossing over the whole thing.
Somebody is lying somewhere, but it's interesting to see what's unfolding. And the Mail here picking up on the Bottomleys.
Yeah, someone's getting very twitchy. A public denial of involvement in child abuse was yesterday issued by Sir Peter Bottomley. Speaking on Radio 4's Today programme, he said people are trying to restart the rumours. People are trying somehow to connect it to the Elm Guest House, a place that I have never been, and I give this public warning: if any substantial publisher links me in any defamatory way, they can expect the same kind of action the Mail on Sunday got. Bottomley actually sued the the Mail on Sunday when it allegedly printed false statement about Mr Bottomley. He confirmed to show his support into an inquiry as long as it didn't interfere with the police inquiry. And there is him and Virginia Bottomley, who were involved with, was it the Council of Civil Liberties?
I don't know about that, but we wait and see what happens. Obviously, he's pretty vociferous in saying, don't come near me. And we already know that within Westminster, there were certain MPs who were warning off. His name's gone out of my head now, Mr.
Simon Danczuk.
Danczuk, thank you. He was trying to get the investigation opened, and I believe it was a Conservative MP who said to him, well, we don't think you should go near this box of trouble. Well,
Chris Fay did actually go and speak to Simon Danczuk in one of the offices of Westminster back sometime in April, and he goes through that all in the interview. Right. But there were a lot of things that Simon Danczuk was not aware of until Chris Fay ended up presenting the evidence to him. And now a lot of the evidence that Chris did show him back in April is now sort of coming in, leaking into the mainstream. So obviously Mr. Danzuk has taken it on board. So well done, Mr. Danzuk.
Right, and more coming out to do with problems around Leon Brittan.
Mr. Brittan, yeah. So this Telegraph story is claiming that Scotland Yard also gave Leon Brittan a dossier naming 15 members of PI. According to this article, the dossier was handed to Sir Thomas Hetherington, who was Director of Public Prosecutions. The Telegraph claims that it is unknown whether Sir Thomas used the information in the dossier to bring any prosecutions, but 2 members of PI were convicted of obscenity the following year. So we're not quite sure if he used that evidence, but it did go to Mr. Brittan, and again, Mr. Brittan didn't know. Disappeared.
No, well, we thought we'd try one of our wiring diagrams to have a look at what's been going on. And the key topic here is really how the British political establishment seems to be protecting paedophiles. But let's head in a northerly direction over to Scotland. We've been warning about Scotland's Junta, Sir Stephen House, Alex Salmon, Kenny McCaskill. We've got 3 men locked together, now able to control the law, the police and prisons, and indeed the criminal system. And what can they do? Well, when somebody stands up to try and expose paedophiles within the establishment, and of course this is Robert Green in relation to the Holly Gregg abuse case, what happens? Well, there is no police investigation. There's no investigation by the political establishment. Documents get lost through the office of Alex Salmon. And then we end up with a child abuse campaigner falsely imprisoned at a cost of well over 2 million to date in order, presumably, to shut him up. So let's go south of the border. Here we are, England. We've got a similar junta now. We've got David Cameron. We've got Theresa May. We've got Michael Gove. Now, he is a man of great interest to us because, of course, he said quite publicly that he didn't think it was a good idea to have a full public inquiry into child abuse. And then in the back, we've got Chris Grayling, of course, the man in charge of the justice system, who knows full well that local authorities are stealing children by breaking law within the courts. And what is Mr. Grayling doing? Nothing. Well, probably here he is, Mr. Brittan, at the centre of matters at the moment, because it's now being reported that he lost, as you do, 2 abuse files full of important information to do with child abusers. But it's easy to lose this sort of stuff, deal with a lot of material, see a lot of things, read a lot of things, didn't really think about it. It's a shame. Well, what's the British government been up to recently? Well, we'd like to bring up a guy called Brian Peed, who we understand is now in prison. He's been shifted around multiple prisons. And what is Brian Peed's crime? Well, when he tried to expose child abuse, the state turned on him, and his information has been of such good quality and so frightening to the British establishment that they've put him in prison. So, south of the border, we've got the police and the political establishment failing to investigate child abuse. We've got missing documents, and we've got child abuse campaigners falsely imprisoned and or put in psychiatric units. And what is the final clue as to what's going on here? Well, the BBC, bless its cotton socks, has got a little video clip up of this gentleman, Tim Fortescue, who used to be part of Heath's government, saying quite openly that when they were running the whip system in Westminster, MPs would come to him, would come to us for help. They needed help in all sorts of ways. It might be scandals to do with small boys. So it seems to me that it's pretty clear what's going on now. We've got paedophiles embedded within the political and wider establishment. Anybody gets near them, you get banged up in prison or a psychiatric unit. And what do the police do? Fail to investigate, so there's no crime. And we're going to lose documents pretty quickly. But it's only a coincidence. North of the border, south of the border, it's just coincidence. So rest assured, Theresa May on the ball because she's nominated NSPCC And here he is, Peter Wanless. This is his photograph from his Twitter page, and this is how he likes to be seen, as a man surrounded by flowers and teddy bears. Well, is he up to the job of an independent investigation? We don't think so. And the first thing we'd like to bring people back to is the fact that Peter Watt, NSPCC Director, Child Protection and Support, worked directly with the Metropolitan Police Service, in fact, Detective Superintendent Gray, to produce the first report on Jimmy Savile, giving victims a voice. So we are going to suggest that NSPCC is far from independent, and is not only not independent where the police is concerned, they've been working in partnership with the police. So presumably that's the approach to make sure the police have done nothing wrong. Well, does it get better? We think it does, because of course remember that Esther Ranson's Childline is now embedded in NSPCC, same organisation. So here she is. This is the lady who said, well, we sort of knew a bit about Jimmy Savile, but I mean, what could you do? What could you do? And here she is biting some part of Mr.
Jim
Savile.
will fix it badge, I think.
A Jim will fix it badge. But we did note that Jimmy Savile is boasting an NSPCC shirt. We've been looking for direct links between Jimmy Savile fundraising for NSPCC. We could do with some help from our audience to pin down exactly, have there been relations between Jimmy Savile and NSPCC as an organisation. But we are already beginning to cast doubt on the independence of NSPCC in the direction of Jimmy Savile.
So this guy, sorry, Brian, this guy's been, whether it's he's leading the main investigation or the secondary investigation, you know, is this going to be a fair and correct investigation? Well, we have to raise these questions now. As
far as the government's concerned, it's going to be fair and independent and correct, because presumably it's going to produce the answer the government wants, which is nothing wrong, nothing to see. So let's also point out that Mr. Wanless is linked in, certainly through his Twittering and Facebook activities, to Sir Tony, that should be Hawkhead, Chief Executive Officer of the massive Action for Children charity, I think with a turnover of just under 200 million. Great money, great profit from children, but it's all independent. Well, unfortunately, Mike came up this morning with this little figure of 11.2 million. This is the amount that NSPCC has been given by the government over 6 years. So It doesn't appear that they're independent of the government either. And we'll just say, if we go back in history, we had Andrew Flanagan, the former NSPCC chief executive, and he was tasked to, well, stop child abuse. I failed, I think.
Miserably.
Failed. So what does this organisation do? Well, it boasts on its website that it is connected into every child safeguarding board in the country. There are a vast number of these boards, but what that actually says is every time a child safeguarding board has failed, Oxfordshire, Nottingham, Anglesey, Haringey, etc., NSPCC must take part of the credit, because they work in collaboration with the safeguarding boards themselves. You don't have to make it up. So let's get back to the NSPCC and Met Police report. This is what it looked like. And here we are, giving victims a voice, and there's no messing around, because it's a joint Metropolitan Police Service and NSPCC report into allegations of sexual abuse made against Jimmy Savile under Operation U-Tree. And notice the sponsors. We've got NAPAC, we've got CEOP, we've got the Association of Chief Police Officers, and we've even got the Crown Prosecution Service. But don't worry, NSPCC is independent.
NAPAC, what's them? Because I know...
National Association for Protection of Children, I think, or close to.
You've got NAPEC as well, haven't you? Which is the National Association for Children in Care, who Chris Fay was an advisor for back in the 80s. They're two different things, aren't they?
You've caught me out on that one.
Okay, we'll investigate that.
I'll check it. We reported yesterday, but it will be another one of the many, many charities which are there ensuring that our children are well protected. So if we come in a different angle to this report, here we are. Let's have a look at the content. Well, aside from pages and pages of statistics, this is a table showing that even back into the 80s, victims were reporting abuse, but nobody did anything about it. So 1980, the first one there, a victim reports abuse. The Metropolitan Police Service didn't do anything. Same with the second one. And on it goes into the following pages. But also we've now got the BBC, of course, failing to investigate. We've got the Department of Health failing to investigate. But this is what interested us, because here it says that information from victims came to the investigation team through the following 12 pathways, of which the first one is NSPCC. So basically, information relating to these crimes has come through NSPCC. Therefore, they are witnesses to the crime. Yeah. Therefore, they are not independent.
No, absolutely not.
Perhaps you'd like to write to your MPs on this subject. Let's come back to Mr. Wanless and let's go tweeting and twittering with him. Well, here he is, the smiling face with the teddy bear. He's very interested in football. He's very interested in cricket. He's also interested in Dolly Parton, and here he is, enjoying a little cuddle with a lady. But his mind gets into some much deeper stuff because he finds it fascinating to see the illustrations of disassociation from Dr. Zuleta. And this is some pretty heavy psychiatry, clinical psychology around the London and Maudsley hospitals. So I'm not quite sure what this is about. He's supposed to be protecting children. What's going on here? Oh, sorry, a bit more to come there, Mike, if you can just bring that one up on screen. This is the other bit. He's talking about an unborn child conference, which took place a few weeks ago. Babies count. What do they count as? Are we talking profit so that they can actually be found places? What are these people doing with unborn children, and what are they doing with the mothers of unborn children, and what is the precise role of NSPCC? Well, as I said earlier, here is Action for Children on his Twitter page, and here we've got Tony Hawkhead, charity CEO, but notice that Mr. Hawkhead is also a non-executive director for DEFRA. So this man is also connected directly into the government. But don't worry, they're all independent.
Shocking.
And the man we said had left his post, but here he is, Andrew Flanagan, was originally the chief executive of NSPCC, and BBC Women's Hour fating him here as the man who was going to deal with the abuse of children. This is the point we made earlier. We've got Judge Gareth Jones talking about social services, Anglesey breaking the law in courts. But what has actually happened to the people responsible, the child safeguarding teams in Anglesey? Have any of those now been charged, and will we see them in court? The answer is no. So we know for a fact that social services can do what they like to children, and they are above the law.
We covered him, I think, only last week, this judge. He made another...
We actually had him up yesterday because we reported that there were a number of these cases. Okay. But this is the picture. The people claiming they're protecting children are actually above the law. So, of course, they can do what they like to the children without fear of any sort of prison sentence. Yeah. But the bad news gets worse, Mike, because you've been having a look into care pathways.
Liverpool Care Pathway, and so this is following the outcry. Obviously, there was an outcry over Liverpool Care Pathway over the last couple of years, and so a panel of 10 people led by Julia Neuberger was asked to carry out a review of the Liverpool Care Pathway. And for those, I'm quite sure you can.
Rain?
Yeah, it is rain. Yes, it is. Yes. This, of course, was an independent review, despite those involved having been publishing opinions on end-of-life care for years in some cases, but it was fully independent, of course. and the report called More Care, Less Pathway was published in July last year. Now, yesterday then, we've been past this document because an alert was put out to a particular hospital requiring staff to cease using the Liverpool Care Pathway with immediate effect. And so I gave the Department of Health press team a call this morning, and it seems that similar alerts were sent out were issued right across the country, in fact. Now, there's a bit of text here, but the recommended action on this document says that the use of LCP documentation must cease immediately. But it doesn't actually give any clue as to what might be replacing it. So while I was on the phone with the Department of Health, I asked them about that. And it turns out that the Neuberger report spawned another report called One Chance to Get It Right. And this was put together by the Leadership Alliance for the Care of Dying People, led by Dr. B. Wee. And they were tasked with devising a replacement, and their report was issued on the 26th of June. And note the common purpose purple cover on that. I thought that was quite interesting. Now, the Leadership Alliance for the Care of Dying People is a group of 21 organisations, including, quote, those statutory organisations to which the panel addressed recommendations, as well as representatives from the voluntary sector who were invited to join the Alliance to develop, support and contribute to its work. So there's the list of organisations, people like the Care Quality Commission, Monitor, those are the two regulators for the National Health Service. We've got Cancer Care in there, the General Medical Council, various NHS bodies. NICE, of course, have to be in there.
I was about to say that.
Yeah. So there are some new priorities for care. And as you might expect, they're absolutely, totally defined and not open to any interpretation at all. So let's have a look at them. Okay, so the first one, the possibility that a person may die within the coming days and hours is recognised and communicated clearly. Decisions about care are made in accordance with the person's needs and wishes, and these are reviewed and revised regularly. It goes on to say, sensitive communication takes place between staff and the person who is dying and those important to them. It goes on to say the dying person and those identified as important to them are involved in decisions about treatment and care. And then it says the people important to the dying person are listened to and their needs are respected. And then it goes on to say care is tailored to the individual and delivered with compassion, with an individual care plan in place. This priority includes the fact that the person must be supported to eat and drink as long as they wish to do so, and that their comfort and dignity prioritised. Now, if that is, even if the rest of it's pretty open to interpretation, but that last one I think has to be viewed as a positive development, I suppose, because the withdrawal of food and fluids without consent from either the patient or the patient's family, it looks like that has been stopped too as a result of the public outcry, and they are absolutely definitive in the various documentation that I've seen so far that the patient must be supported to eat and drink, and so of course this doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to be vigilant, and anybody that doesn't experience this type of treatment in the future should be continuing to raise alarm bells. Yes, Lou?
Does this mean the people that were put on the Liverpool Care Pathway and their food and water denied of them, does this mean the families might get some sort of an apology for literal torture to their loved ones?
No, it doesn't mean that. It means that there seems to be an acknowledgement that Liverpool Care Pathway was a step too far, that people weren't ready for it quite yet, and so they've taken a step back. Right. But you might call it a tactical retreat.
But here we've got policy, haven't we, Mike, being decided by people who are effectively unaccountable. These people are meeting in a informal association, a collaboration.
Yes, and of course there are all those organisations that are represented. It's who is actually involved in making the decisions. Yeah. And the original Neuberger report, as I say, Julia Neuberger herself has been writing about assisted dying for a very long time now, and we know her views on that. And many of the other people have similar views. So there's clearly an underlying agenda to push this assisted dying situation forward. And of course, we've got the assisted dying bill coming up in the not too distant future. So there seems to be while they've taken a step back on that one issue of food and fluids, there still is a general move forward to be more permissive on this issue.
Yeah, and we've certainly, UK Column has been given documentation from local hospitals showing people marked not for resuscitation. That's been marked on their medical paperwork with no dialogue with family, and indeed without a doctor's signature in one case. But don't worry, everything is fine under Mr. Cameron. Well, jobs, of course, are going extremely well, Mike. The economy's booming. We've never had it so good.
Indeed. So on the 2nd of this month, we pointed at this BBC, typically crass reporting on the part of the BBC here, talking about the state of British manufacturing, about how it's strengthened in June. Everything was fantastic. But unfortunately, on the same day, of course, the BBC had to report that Tata Steel had just shed 400 jobs at Port Talbot. But today, they've, unfortunately for them, had to report that UK manufacturing, surprise, surprise, 1 week later, UK manufacturing is in a surprise fall, 1.3%, in fact. So you have to ask why the discrepancy. Of course, it's because the BBC, in its other reports, was lying on behalf of King David's long-term economic plan, which, as we've said before, is in fact a long-term economic disaster. And of course, they're using surveys in order to do that. So they come up with these fantastic headlines about how great manufacturing is doing, about how great employment is doing, on the basis of surveys and opinion. But unfortunately for the BBC, once in a while, the Office for National Statistics actually releases some figures that are more based in fact. I'm not saying they're 100%, but they're a heck of a lot better, or closer to reality than the surveys that the BBC normally relies on. Yeah. And so this is where we are. UK manufacturing output in a surprise fall. But
it is a surprise because nobody knew that this was going to happen.
No,
so it's come as a big surprise.
Nobody knows much about anything, really, do they?
Right, well, look, this government, just like every government for the last 40 years, is continuing to decimate British manufacturing and industry. That's their intention, that's their policy, and any productive economy left in this country is there absolutely in spite of government efforts. And so we've just got to remember the mantra, bring back the Bradbury.
Bring back the Bradbury.
Okay, well, credit where it's due.
Just a little reminder, if anybody hasn't seen it, the latest from Chris Fay. Bill Maloney is interviewing Chris Fay, who worked for NAPEC as an advisor to the children around the Barnes area where Elm Guest House was. And there it is on screen. Anyone who hasn't seen it, I urge people to go and have a look. And anyone who didn't hear yesterday's show where Brian came on and Bill to discuss the Westminster paedophile ring, it is up on Mixcloud now, available. So just type in my name and it's there.
Actually, we'll be playing that out on the live stream at 2:45.
Okay, there you go. It's on the live stream at 2:45. Thanks, Mike.
That's good.
That's it.
Well, there we are. We couldn't put it in more blunt terms, but if you want to know why the country's in such a pitiful state, we have got liars, criminals and paedophiles clearly running the country. And until we, the British people, decide we're not going to permit this to happen and get rid of them, things are likely to get worse. The good news is clearly the cracks are beginning to appear in the establishment, but we need more people to push. If you've picked up on some of the things that we've raised today, can we ask all of our viewers and listeners to do something with the information? Challenge your MP, talk to a neighbour, Twitter, tweet. Let's get the true state of the nation reported out there, and let's start to bring some of these despicable people who think they're entitled to run our lives. Let's get them into court, and preferably in front of a grand jury, as Mike was suggesting yesterday.
And while you're chatting to your friends, can you point them in the direction of the ukcolumn.org and see if they can subscribe, so we can continue doing this and not paying advods fines. Also, we have the bumper stickers, leaflets, T-shirts and everything available on the website. If you're interested, email carol@ukcolumn.org. And is there a health revolution today, Mike?
No, there isn't. Clive has other plans, I believe, back next week, just as with Ian Crane, back next week on Monday.
Okay, so evening shows back next week, bar Doom Watch, which I presume will be on Friday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we must go. Thank you for joining us. There's a very hot dog in the studio. We need to go. The temperature's rising. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.